Melanie Watson, who starred in 1980s show Diff'rent Strokes, has died at the age of 57. The actress was best known for playing Arnold's friend Kathy on the 1980s TV show.
The curse of Diff'rent Strokes has claimed yet another life, and this one hits differently. While the world remembers the tragic fates of Gary Coleman and Dana Plato, there's one story that never got the attention it deserved. Melanie Watson, who brought warmth and representation to millions of viewers as Kathy Gordon, lived a life marked by extraordinary courage in the face of unimaginable challenges. In this video, we're finally telling her story, and it's going to break your heart. How did a young woman with one of the most fragile bodies imaginable end up changing television history without anyone really noticing at the time? The girl who changed television. Okay, so picture this. It's the early 1980s, and TV is just starting to deal with real issues. Diff'rent Strokes was already pushing boundaries, but then they did something that was pretty much unheard of at the time. They cast Melanie Watson as a recurring character. And here's the thing, Melanie had a condition called osteogenesis imperfecta. Basically, her bones were super fragile and could break really easily. Now, this wasn't like hiring someone to play a character with a disability. Melanie actually lived with this condition every single day. We're talking about something where a simple fall, or even just bumping into something, could cause a fracture. Most people with severe cases don't even make it past childhood. But Melanie? She wasn't about to let that stop her from doing what she wanted to do. When she went in to audition for Diff'rent Strokes, she wasn't looking for anyone's pity. She just wanted to act. And the producers saw something special in her, not because of her disability, but because she had real talent and this incredible presence that just jumped off the screen. So what exactly made Melanie's character Kathy Gordon so different from anything audiences had ever seen before? Kathy Gordon enters the picture. Melanie played this character named Kathy Gordon, and she showed up in 4 episodes starting in early 1980 through 1983 to 1984. Now, I know 4 episodes doesn't sound like a lot, but trust me, the impact was huge. Back then, you just didn't see physically disabled characters on TV, period. And when you did, they were usually just there to be inspirational or whatever, not actual people with personalities. But Kathy Gordon, she was a real character. She was funny, she was stubborn sometimes, she had opinions. The writers didn't make her disability the only thing about her, which was pretty revolutionary for the time. There's this one episode from 1982 that's actually named after her character, just called Kathy. In it, Arnold tries to convince her to walk without her crutches, and she's like, "No thanks, I'm good." It wasn't some magical moment where she's suddenly cured or whatever. It was just 2 kids having an argument, and Arnold learning to respect her choices. Pretty cool, right? And here's something interesting. Gary Coleman, who played Arnold, also dealt with health stuff his whole life. He had a kidney condition that affected his growth. So you had these 2 young actors who both understood what it was like to be different, to have people stare, to have to work twice as hard to prove themselves. That connection came through on screen. But while viewers saw a groundbreaking character on screen, what was Melanie actually dealing with once the cameras stopped rolling? The reality behind the scenes. Okay, so let's talk about what it was actually like for Melanie to work on this show. In a 2020 interview, she opened up about how rough it really was. Get this, there were no wheelchairs provided on set, like, at all. So she had to be carried around, and she was reluctant to use her crutches during filming, which made everything even harder. This was the early 80s, and TV sets just weren't built with accessibility in mind. What was easy for everyone else became this whole production for Melanie, just the basic stuff, standing for takes, hitting your marks, doing scenes over and over again. All of that was way more complicated when you're dealing with a condition where your bones can break at any moment. Look, I can't imagine what that must have been like. Every other actor on set could just walk from their trailer to the soundstage without thinking about it. For Melanie, every single movement required planning and help from other people. And if just getting through a workday was that hard, imagine the pressure of knowing you weren't just acting for yourself, but for an entire community watching you. The double-edged sword of representation. Here's something that doesn't get talked about enough. Melanie wasn't just acting. She was representing an entire community of people who never saw themselves on TV. That's a lot of pressure, you know? Every scene she did, every line she delivered, she was basically carrying the hopes of millions of people with disabilities who wanted to be seen and included. Parents were writing letters to the show, talking about how much it meant to finally have a character their kids could relate to. Kids without disabilities were learning that their classmates with different physical abilities weren't aliens from another planet. They were just regular kids. But that also meant Melanie had zero room to mess up. If she had a bad day or an episode didn't work, it wasn't just, oh well, that performance didn't land. It could have set back disability representation on TV for years. That's not fair to put on anyone, especially a young actress who was already dealing with a serious medical condition. And really, Hollywood in the early 80s was even worse than it is now when it came to accommodating people with disabilities. There were no laws requiring producers to make accommodations. If they helped Melanie, it was because they chose to, not because they had to. She was literally creating a path that didn't exist yet. After carrying all that weight so young, why did Melanie make the shocking decision to walk away from acting altogether? Life after Diff'rent Strokes. So when Diff'rent Strokes ended in 1986, Melanie did something that surprised people. She just stopped acting. Now, for someone who had fought so hard to get into the industry, to prove that disabled actors could succeed, walking away seemed weird, right? But here's the thing. The physical toll was just too much. Every role came with medical risks that most actors never even think about. She'd done something incredible for disability representation on TV, but she'd also sacrificed a lot of herself to do it. Instead of chasing more acting gigs, Melanie got involved with service animal training. She helped start this charity called Train Right that focused on properly training dogs to work as service animals. This wasn't just random charity work. She knew firsthand how much the right support and could change someone's life. Maybe it didn't have the glamour of Hollywood, but think about it. Every single dog that Train Right trained went on to help someone with a disability live a more independent life. That's pretty amazing when you think about the long-term impact. But leaving Hollywood didn't mean leaving struggle behind. So what did Melanie's everyday reality actually look like when the spotlight was gone? The daily battle. I'll be straight with you. Melanie's everyday life was hard in ways most of us can't even comprehend. Osteogenesis imperfecta doesn't get better as you get older. Actually, it usually gets worse because your body has accumulated years and years of fractures and injuries. We're talking about people who can have hundreds of bone fractures over their lifetime. Hundreds. Every single one comes with pain, recovery time, and the stress of knowing another one could happen literally any second. Getting dressed, making food, taking a shower, sneezing too hard, all the stuff we do on autopilot became these careful, calculated tasks. Doctors weren't even sure how long Melanie would live. A lot of people with severe cases don't make it past childhood. The ones who do often have shorter lifespans because of all the complications. So every birthday she celebrated, was basically defying the odds. In 1994, Melanie got married to a guy named Roger Bernhardt. They were married until 1996, and from what people said, those 2 years were really happy. It proved that her condition didn't define her worth or stop her from having meaningful relationships. But I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Relationships are complicated. The constant medical appointments, the limitations on what they could do together, the ever-present risk of injury, well, that puts stress on any relationship, no matter how strong. And when you place her life next to the infamous Diff'rent Strokes curse, does Melanie's story fit the pattern or completely defy it? The curse strikes again. You've probably heard about the Diff'rent Strokes curse. Gary Coleman died at 42 from a fall that caused a brain hemorrhage. Dana Plato overdosed at 34. Todd Bridges battled addiction for years. The list goes on, and it's really tugs at your heartstrings. But Melanie's story was different. She wasn't dealing with the aftermath of child stardom or the pressures of fame. Her battle was with her own body, and that fight started the day she was born. She didn't want the spotlight, didn't chase headlines, didn't have public meltdowns. That's what makes it even more tragic, in a way. While everyone was focused on the dramatic falls of other Diff'rent Strokes stars, Melanie was quietly fighting for her life, dealing with challenges that would break most people. No tabloid coverage, no paparazzi, no intervention specials, just a woman living her life with incredible courage. And you know what's wild? She outlived Gary Coleman despite having way more severe health issues. That tells you everything you need to know about her determination to keep going. After surviving decades longer than doctors ever expected, what finally brought Melanie's long fight to an end? The final chapter. On December 28, 2025, Melanie was hospitalized in Colorado Springs. She'd been having complications with bleeding, which for someone with osteogenesis imperfecta is extremely dangerous. Her body, which had already been through so much, started shutting down quickly. The doctors did everything they could, but her brother Robert said it best. She'd already lived way longer than anyone expected. Every day had been borrowed time, and she'd made the most of it. Melanie Watson Bernhardt passed away at 57 years old. For her family and friends, especially Robert, the loss was devastating. But they also knew that her life, while filled with challenges, had been remarkable. When the headlines faded and the cameras were gone, what kind of legacy did Melanie actually leave behind? A legacy beyond the screen. Look, it would be easy to just remember Melanie for those 4 episodes of Diff'rent Strokes. They were important, genuinely groundbreaking. But her life was about so much more than that. The work she did with service animal training touched so many lives. Every person who got a properly trained service dog, because of her efforts, gained independence and confidence. Those dogs don't just help with physical tasks, they change people's entire lives. And just by living her life openly, by refusing to hide, by insisting on being included in spaces that weren't designed for her, she changed how people thought about disability. Everyone who met her walked away with a different perspective. The kids who watched her on Diff'rent Strokes in the 80s, some of them grew up to become doctors, teachers, advocates, policymakers who remembered Kathy Gordon and worked to make the world more inclusive. That ripple effect is still going. If her life meant so much to so many people, what does Melanie Watson's story really say about the way we measure human worth? What this teaches us. Here's what gets me about Melanie's story. We live in a society that measures people's worth by what they can produce, how much they can do, how normal they appear. People like Melanie get pushed to the sidelines or treated like they're less valuable. But her life proved that's complete nonsense. Your worth isn't about what you can physically do. It's about who you are and how you affect the people around you. She showed us why representation actually matters. When kids with disabilities see themselves on TV, it tells them they belong in this world. When kids without disabilities see diverse characters, it shapes how they understand humanity from day one. Melanie also showed us what it means to live on your own terms. She could have stayed home, played it safe, avoided risks. Instead, she chose to be visible, to take chances, to live as fully as possible. That takes guts. And when acting became too physically demanding, she pivoted to advocacy work that could make a real difference. That's wisdom right there. Understanding that impact comes in many forms, and sometimes the greatest work happens behind the scenes. But here's the uncomfortable truth. What did it actually cost Melanie to be one of the first people like her to be seen at all? The cost of being first. Here's the part of Melanie's story that really stings when you sit with it. Being the first, or one of the few, is never glamorous in real time. We love celebrating pioneers after the fact, but living as one? That's lonely, exhausting, and in Melanie's case, physically dangerous. People love to say representation matters, but they rarely talk about who pays the price for that representation. Melanie wasn't stepping into a welcoming industry with ramps, accommodations, and safety nets. She was stepping onto sets that weren't built for her body, run by people who didn't know how to protect her, in an era where accessibility wasn't even part of the conversation. Every scene she filmed came with risk. Every retake meant more strain. Every long day increased the chance of injury. And yet, there was an unspoken expectation that she should just be grateful to be there. That's the ugly side of being inspirational. You're applauded for showing up, but rarely supported in staying safe. And let's talk about the emotional toll for a second. Melanie was a child and later a young woman constantly aware that her presence was symbolic. That if something went wrong, if audiences reacted badly, if executives decided it was too much, the door could slam shut, not just for her, but for others like her. That kind of pressure messes with you. It makes you second-guess yourself. It makes you push through pain when you probably shouldn't. It makes you feel responsible for an entire community when you're just trying to live your life. And yet, she kept going, quietly, without tantrums, public breakdowns, or demanding attention, which, ironically, may be why her story slipped through the cracks. Because Hollywood knows how to process chaos. It knows how to cover scandals, addictions, arrests, and dramatic downfalls. What it doesn't know how to deal with is someone like Melanie, someone who wasn't messy, someone who didn't implode, someone whose suffering wasn't loud or marketable. Her pain was private. Her strength was consistent. And that doesn't trend. There's also something deeply unfair about how her contribution has been minimized over time. 4 episodes. That's what people reduce her legacy to. 4 episodes, as if those appearances didn't change how millions of viewers saw disability for the first time. For some kids watching in the early 1980s, Kathy Gordon was the first disabled peer they ever encountered. For some parents, it was the first time they saw their child reflected on screen without pity or caricature. For some disabled viewers, it was the first moment they realized, oh, I'm allowed to exist out loud. You can't quantify that in Nielsen ratings. And when Melanie walked away from acting, it wasn't a failure. It was survival. She recognized that continuing in an industry that demanded more than it protected could cost her years of her life. So she chose something quieter, something safer, something that still mattered. That decision alone says a lot about her clarity and self-awareness. Because, let's be honest, if she'd stayed, Hollywood would have praised her resilience while doing very little to actually support her. We've seen that pattern play out over and over again with disabled performers, child stars, and anyone deemed inspiring but inconvenient. Melanie opted out of that cycle, and that choice deserves respect. So when you step back and look at her life as a whole, was Melanie Watson's story a tragedy or a quiet triumph? So Melanie Watson died at 57, and yeah, that's tragic. Not because 57 is super young by normal standards, but because the world needed more time with her. We needed more of her perspective, more of her advocacy, more of her quiet courage. The Diff'rent Strokes curse didn't really get Melanie the way it got some of her castmates. She wasn't destroyed by fame or Hollywood. She fought a battle that was always going to be uphill, and she fought it with more strength than most of us could ever muster. To Robert and everyone who loved her, your sister's impact went way beyond the people who knew her personally. She touched lives through her advocacy, through her TV work, and just by living openly and authentically. She proved that disability doesn't make you less human, and that every life has value. Rest in peace, Melanie Watson Bernhardt. You were brave, you mattered, and you made a difference. Here's the real tragedy, though. We're still living in a world where her story is considered exceptional instead of just expected, where disability representation on TV is still fighting for scraps, where people with conditions like osteogenesis imperfecta still face barriers that should have been torn down decades ago. Melanie deserved better. She deserved a world built with people like her in mind from the start. She deserved to not have to be a pioneer, to not have to fight just to exist in public spaces, but she lived in a world that failed her in many ways, so she spent her life trying to make it better for the people coming after her. That's heartbreaking, but it's also beautiful. Her challenges were real and constant, but the way she faced them, that was inspiring. If this video taught you something new about Melanie Watson, drop a comment below and let me know your thoughts. Hit that subscribe button if you want more stories like this, and remember to treat everyone you meet with kindness and respect, the way Melanie showed us how to do throughout her entire life. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.